So I know, this is all pretty theoretical. Best thing we can do, let's check in with some of our deep dive farmers to hear what they actually do on their farms as far as crop rotation.
A corn-soybean rotation long-term just doesn't cut it with organic.
I think a good rotation is got to be diverse, and that's, I think, is the key to everything that we're doing here.
Everything on an organic crop operation revolves around the rotation, okay?
People always want to ask what your rotation is, and I kind of chuckle a little bit at that question because for us, that rotation is something that's always evolving and changing.
So some of the crops we grow are winter wheat, spring wheat, barley, lentils, chickpeas, mustard, millet, flax.
This year we've got popcorn, corn, soybeans. Sunflower was new this year. We've done buckwheat and hemp in the past, various cereals, oats, rye. Haven't been able to get wheat in the past couple of years. Done some triticale in the past, and then, you know, all the various covers and
wheat, durum wheat, peas, and lentils, flax. We're even trying to row crop some corn this year, but that's not going so well because we don't get enough moisture here to actually sustain corn. But
you know, we grow a lot of small grains, and the amount of comments that we get and of, you know, what is that? What are you growing out there? You know, to me that's kind of fun, and I kind of get thrill, I guess, a little bit of being the weird guy.
At the beginning, you know, when I was going to farm conferences, and I'd always be like, I had a notebook, and like as people were talking, I was like rewriting our crop rotation and like figuring out like, did I crack the code? Is this like it? But the thing is, it's really not. It's not a static thing. It's going to change every year.
Because about the time you figure out you got your rotation perfect, all of a sudden a year comes along that's wetter than normal or drier than normal and changes things on you. But it works the masses of the years how we do it.
I would say that we don't have set defined rotations. They're more evolving over time. So as more acres come into organic certification, and with the scale and our unique context on this farm, with the size of our team, with the tools that we have at our disposal, the markets that we're finding that we can access, that's informing year to year how this dance of crops is playing out on these acres.
And so you sit down and you try and go through like, all right, well, what's my rotation and what can I grow? What do I have the tools? So you're kind of limited to your equipment as well.
You know, each field may have its own different rotation depending on soil type, landscape.
While falling back on some general principles like, let's make sure we don't have 4,000 acres of summer row crops. Let's make sure we don't need large applications of manure to provide our nutrients on every acre every year. Let's make sure that we have opportunities to outcompete certain weeds and not have the same operations happening on a given field year in, year out, where certain weeds can really find a niche and start to thrive and become problematic.
No same or like similar crop. I try not to do those 2 years in a row. So I won't do a wheat on a wheat acre. I won't do pulse on a pulse acre.
So that's why we plant winter wheat on buckwheat stubble. We plant spring wheat after soybeans or dry beans. Winter wheat after corn isn't something that we would do on the farm. It might work in the calendar, but all that stover is too much of a risk for fusarium head blight for us.
And I'd like to give that ground a rest every, you know, either every other year or once every 3 years, and put it into a cover crop.
Planting something that's going to pay. You know, I mean, that's obviously important too.
So we have some general ideas, general principles that we're trying to follow, but that's not necessarily translating into a set, defined, year in, year out rotation.
So we do a rotation of corn, soybeans, wheat. We do cover crops of red clover and rye. And so in an ideal world with ideal weather, we have 5 crops and harvest 3 in our rotation.
So for a while, our rotation was a big circle. Now it's actually more like an infinity sign, with corn in the middle. So like there's one sequence, which is the corn into buckwheat, into winter wheat, frost-seeded red clover, and then actually back to corn. But then the second turnaround will do typically oats into a cover crop, into beans, and then into alfalfa, and then that goes back into corn the other way. From corn, you can kind of go either way.
So a lot of times I'll start my rotation with lentils or wheat. Then a lot of times we'll go with oats, if we're growing oats, the second year. A lot of times the third year I'll go to buckwheat a lot of times, and then the fourth year I'll go back to like oats or wheat and put it into a nurse crop, have it as a nurse crop. And if I leave it into alfalfa for 3 to 5 years, generally when I take it out, I'll plant wheat on it because there's more nitrogen in the ground, or lentils. Lentils aren't a high requirement for nitrogen. However, it's clean ground, and they require very clean ground.
Usually for me, I think it's somewhere between 5 and 7 years on the rotation, depending on weather and climate and what we're kind of dealing with. But I try, and wheat might make it in there a couple more times in that 5 year, but for the full rotation, it'll be 5 to 7 years.
So we have 2 rotations that we have about half of our land each on. We'll do a wheat, alfalfa, and then corn bean, and maybe another corn bean, and then back to wheat alfalfa rotation. That whenever we have alfalfa for 2 or 3 years, really does a great job on weed control. Coming out of alfalfa, we just had very clean fields to start with. So I have a second rotation, which is wheat, corn, and soybeans. And after the wheat, I put a cover crop on. And so that's my regeneration strategy. So every 3 years, I'm putting back into the soil. And the nice thing about wheat is we generally get it off early, and we're able to get a good cover crop.
This rotation on this field currently is kind of based off of Dick Thompson's rotation from the 90s of corn, soybeans, corn, oats, hay. And Dick proved over several years of research that his method, even using standard conventional pricing, that his yields would be enough better based on that rotation, that over a 5-year period he would have more income per acre versus a just continuous corn rotation or a corn soybean rotation.
So there are some basic things that we're trying to accomplish. We do not want all 4,000 acres to fall into summer annual row crops in one given year. That'd be great to be able to just knock it out of the park, and get great revenue on organic corn and soybean markets, and the prices that they have to offer. But agronomically and operationally, we would fall flat on our face. Okay, we want to have a balance of summer annual row crops like popcorn, field corn, soybeans, sunflower, balanced with solid seeded broadacre crops that are seeded either in the fall or early spring, harvested in the summer, balanced against those summer annual row crops that we're seeding in the spring, harvesting in the fall.
Rotation serves a couple different goals. I think that number one is, we've got to make money. You got to have something that's going to break up the disease cycles, pest cycles, and nutrient cycling as well. I mean, you got to be coming at that from different angles to keep the pests and diseases guessing while you're increasing your soil health.
If I did this interview in 2 years, I'd probably have a different rotation. If I did it 2 years ago, I'd have a different rotation, and that's okay.